Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. Do we have an awesome conversation for you today? But before we get to that, Sean, I want to give a little update on my reservation for the cruise.
Yeah.
2 episodes ago, we let people know that I actually didn't have an accessible room reserved for the cruise, and it was a combination of a missed detail by the travel agent and by me. I will admit that. And so it was pretty sketchy there. You and I were going back and forth about, all right, how are we going to do this? You know, you had an accessible room. So we're like, all right, can I use your room? Like, what do I need to go to the bathroom? Do we need to share a room the whole time? How do we get keys? Like, all this stuff. But finally, Rocky, our amazing travel agent, cruise director, was able to get me a room, an accessible room.
Sorry, blows my mind that an accessible room came available this close to the cruise.
I know, right? Yeah, I think Rocky was working his magic behind the scenes right when he found that out. He takes it upon himself, I think, to make these things happen, and he takes it personally. That's why he's so great. And so partly, I guess, you know, our gratitude segment is at the end of every episode, but I want to express some gratitude for Rocky right now.
Fair. Thank you. Yeah, glad you did. Rocky's been a huge help. Speaking of past episodes, Kyle, did you ever get your suitcase from your recent trip to California?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about it. Because it took almost a week because of,
the storm.
I assume mainly it was because of the storm, but I think also the delivery service is a little short-handed at the moment.
Sure.
And but I set my alarm for 7 a.m. every morning. I happened to get up 10 minutes, or I was awake. I was still in bed, and I looked at my phone. Somebody had just texted. They were in the parking lot trying to find my place because they had my suitcase. It was a Friday, and my suitcase had gone missing the previous Saturday, and it showed up at 7 a.m. on that Friday. It was crazy.
To be fair, for those that have maybe no idea where Kyle lives, it's ridiculous. His complex is so giant, and there's, I don't know, it doesn't make sense. It is hard to find his condo.
Yeah, I think there's like 350 units, and none of them are like in order. The numbers make zero sense.
The
Like
streets don't make sense. The numbers don't make sense. It goes from like 1, 3, 5, A, B, C. Like it doesn't make sense.
You walk around outside sometimes and you see an Amazon or like an Uber Eats driver that is just so frustrated.
And you know they could use your help.
and they go, "Hey, can you help me?" And I can't. Like, I know even the people that live here don't even know. And it's got to be excruciating for them.
So one last question for the follow-ups. Did you order more underwear? Did you ever get more? Or
I made do with 2 pairs. And
okay.
So I was sick that week, so I worked from home. Nobody had to, I didn't have to go out in public. So I was like, maybe I'll save like, a few bucks right here and just wait. Okay. And also, I mean, as far as I knew, my suitcase was going to come in the next few hours.
Sure.
But then 5 days later, showed up. So
just still an idea for those of you thinking about Christmas or birthday gifts.
An extra
seriously.
set. Yep.
Kyle, thanks for all the updates. I'm glad that we're keeping our 2DD squad up to date on your life.
Yeah, it's important. All right, Sean, our interview today is with Joe Zinski. He's a data scientist who we met through our friend David Feigenbaum. Not only is Joe one of the best at what he does, but he's a wonderful and insightful person. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope our listeners do too. Joe, thanks so much for joining us here on the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. I saw you on stage last year at the Young Investigator Draft, but we're really excited to talk to you today. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, such a pleasure to be on. Thanks for having me.
So, like I said, we saw you on stage last year at the Uplifting Athletes Young Investigator Draft because you were receiving an award recognition for your work as a young investigator, and you received a grant from Uplifting Athletes. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, so the grant was to support my work as a data scientist in David Feigenbaum's lab. We're working with on Castleman disease, which is a really severe, debilitating, often deadly autoimmune disorder where your body really just goes into hyperdrive and produces way too much inflammation and attacks all of your organs. And for the most severe cases, if you don't find a good treatment and diagnosis quickly, you could die within a year. It's quite severe. Some people have milder cases that it drags on for long periods of time with lower levels of inflammation. Pretty heterogeneous illness, and one that we don't know what causes it. And that's the hardest thing about it is in order to find a really effective treatment, we have to know what the mechanism of the disease is, and we just don't. So my research is focusing on trying to find diagnostic tools and treatments, but all of that generally goes back to the heart of we need to find the mechanism that causes this disease so that we can find a really effective treatment.
So you say data science. What's the data that you work with? Is it like actual, basic science lab data? Is it clinical data generated by patients? Like what? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's mostly patient data. We do kind of all. It's like a small pharmaceutical company that's not for profit that's funded by the university, but we have an arm that treats patients. We have an arm that goes out and gets patient tissue, especially lymph nodes, because they're really valuable to see what's going on with inflammation. We have a wet lab arm that's validating things that we find in the data science, and then we have our data scientist wing, which is just the two of us, but we have to process all of the patient data, and these days in science, for almost everything is big data, right? Like the AI revolution is upon us. We have entire patient genomes, so we can try to see if there's mutations that you're born with. We have cells we have blood from patients. We have lymph nodes from patients. We'll look at all of the genes that are manipulated in those places. We'll look at all of the proteins that they have. So we have these huge panels of data, right? And then they give it to us and they say, what's going on? Figure it out. And so then we spend a lot of time doing that. Yeah.
Joe, forgive my naivety here, but when you're analyzing data, are you also in a position where you can interpret that and that becomes a known thing? Or does that have to go through a committee or, get signed off by several different layers of MDs or PhDs?
One of the main things that I do is put the data in a form that is visualizable, that's parsable, that I'm not an immunologist by trade. I'm a cell biologist, so I know a fair amount about immunology by picking it up now. But Catherine and Melanie and some of the other amazing scientists in our lab are definitely have more expertise in some of these areas. And so I want to make the data super accessible to all of the brilliant people in our lab, so that everyone can, try to figure out what to do next, right? Because we'll end up with a bunch of candidates and a bunch of pathways, and they'll all look pretty up or down regulated. And then we'll think about, all right, which is the most promising one? What do we want to spend our time on going forward? What do we want to commit wet lab resources to verifying, and then try to make actual treatments and push towards clinical trial? All of those decisions need to be made by everyone's input. And so much of data science is just making visualizations that are describe the data in a way that everyone can access, so that we can make those decisions.
So I'm just gonna be honest with you. If I were on that team and you were making some visually appealing things for me to read, I would need you to use coloring crayons to help me make sense of it all.
Hey, I love good colors. I think that really nice, vibrant colors can really help with processing information. So,
all right, cool.
I would use the crayons
just putting
for you.
that out there.
So, Joe, going back to being on stage at the Uplifting Athletes event last year, that event is designed to honor young investigators and make sure they know that all of us know that they're incredible and they deserve all the praise that an athlete does. And maybe this is a leading question, but, what was that effective? How did it make you feel to be on that stage last year?
It was pretty special. Every time someone came up, they would have that whole video from your mentors and the other people in your lab talking about, they think you're worthy of this thing and that you're very good at the stuff that you do. And it's always really flattering and heartwarming to hear that other people think you do valuable work and that you will continue to really help. And I really appreciated all of the kind words. And it was obviously a big honor to be selected for something like that. And it, I've gotten grants before, right? Like one of the things about science is that they try to emphasize in that draft is we're constantly having to put our ideas out and then get selected, and they say, okay, these are the ideas we want, here's some money to go do the thing, right? And it's generally with no fanfare. We spend 6 to 12 months writing a thing for one proposal, and then we'll send it in and they'll take 3 months to review it, and then you'll get a letter and it says, you have money now, and then you go and do the thing, right? That's all the fanfare that we have.
Wow.
So getting up on a stage and being like, you have money now is like, whoa, okay, yeah, that's cool. We have the money, but also like, thanks for acknowledging that we're about to go do something really awesome. Yeah.
So the other thing that I noticed, I didn't know you last year, and you were introduced on stage and you rolled up in a wheelchair, just like Sean and I were sitting last year in our wheelchairs. And, that creates an immediate connection, right? Like, oh, hey, that guy looks like me, and he's a brilliant scientist. Like, this is crazy. So, I wanted, I guess, what brought you to your work as a scientist? And I understand that it's spinal cord injury, which is obviously different from FA and rare disease, and sort of how did your injury affect your career, first of all? I wanted to kind of...
Oh, yeah. Well, long story.
Yeah, I'm sure. Maybe that's
I'm getting up there in age, so all my stories are long now because I've got... you just got a lot of years to connect point A to point B at this point. But prior to going into that, like when you see someone else, do you do the thing when you see someone on the street in a wheelchair, you just like immediately like make eye contact and go, hey, like, what's up, man?
Give a little nod. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a kindredness to navigating the world and
I do that with other people driving Subarus.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, sorry.
I've seen the commercials. I guess that tracks. But yes, so my journey as a scientist and with my injuries, that not all these things are connected, right? Like there isn't some overarching thing, but they're somewhat connected, right? Like I broke my neck after my freshman year in college, and I was an athlete. I watched the Ataxia, and I was really moved by a lot of the things, by your backgrounds, by how you were handling things, by grappling with just the magnitude of receiving a diagnosis like that at a young age, right? Like you go from this thing where your biggest problems are like, I'm not cool enough, and I want to like get a girlfriend, and like I don't know, I want to make sure that I have a friend group in college, and what am I going to do with my job and my life? And then they're like, for me, I broke my neck, and it was like, all right, how do I get my pants on? And like, how am I gonna? I was at the University of Connecticut at the time, and I was at Jefferson here in Philly. They did a surgery and put plates in, and I couldn't even to describe, for your viewers, I'm a quadriplegic. At the time, I couldn't move my hands. I can sort of now. I have somewhat there, but none of my core works. None of my trunk. I can shrug my shoulders and use my biceps and triceps and my wrists. And I'm laying there, and how am I supposed to go back to school? How am I supposed to do anything? Like I think at the time, I was very much in denial about. I think I was like, all right, science is cool. Like, it'll fix me. Like, there has to be a thing, right? Your first thought is like, there's so much we know about everything. There must be some research that's going to make this better for me, right? And over the years, I've kind of realized that no, it's like, this is pretty hard to fix, and this is probably how it's going to be for me, regardless of what was going to happen with getting that much better or not. The magnitude of your problems just completely shifts. And it's interesting because to the outside observer, everyone's always like, well, how do you deal with that? Like, what are you going to, like, what are you going to do? And like, the answer is always that just, there's nothing to do, right? Like you're either just going to not do anything, or you're going to sort of put one foot in front of the other and do it. And yeah, it's hard and it sucks, but like the magnitude of your problems change, but everyone's got their problems, right? And to them, they feel about the same size, right? My problems the year prior felt big, and they were, just standard teenage problems. And then my problems in the year after also felt big, and they were obviously on a different scale, but we have our goals and we're working towards them. And really looking back on that time, about a year I took off from school, to do surgeries and get back, and then eventually went back to the University of Connecticut. It was actually kind of a great year. I physically was going through a lot, but I spent a lot of time with my dad. My family really supported me in that time. I was going to therapy all the time, and it felt like we were a team against this really horrible thing that was happening. But it was us, and we woke up every day and drove to Ronald McDonald House and went to various medical places and did what we needed to do, and eventually got back down there. But wasn't necessarily the worst year of my life, honestly. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling and tangenting. What was the initial part of this question?
Part of it is, when we asked you to be on the podcast, you wrote an email back. And sort of the crux of the email was, one of the things you mentioned is, everyone during the time when you were injured, everyone did whatever they could. They're like, I don't care what I have in my life. Like, I want to help Joe. And everyone kind of rallied around you, and they gave so much of themselves. And as you said, all they asked in return is that you live a good and fulfilled life.
Yeah.
And then partly what you were left with is, okay, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what does that mean at all, but also in the context of my situation where I am right now?
Yeah.
I think it's a similar place that Sean and I have found ourselves in after our diagnosis, where a lot of people find themselves in after any huge event in life that changes so much, right? And
Yeah.
it's a common human experience, and so that's that's really what I wanted to get at today.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing you two talk about it. You talked about it a bit in the Ataxian, but I wanna pick your brains and kinda hear how you narrate that part of your life. But yeah, once I got past the that we first it's just like there's no time to think about the future, right? Like you are deluge of medical stuff and a year of surgeries and doing all those things, and there's you get back, and then eventually I get back to University of Connecticut. I'm up there, alone. I'm from New Jersey, so it was like far away from my parents, and I had this nice team of nursing students that was helping me out, and I'm there. I'm on my own again. I got back to college, and I hadn't thought past that. Like that was the where I was going to go. I had to get to that place, and I got there, and it was like, okay, now I gotta. What do I do next? And
Yeah.
I started to think about the old stuff, right? Like I wanted to go back to University of Connecticut because my friends were there, and I was going to be an engineer at the time. I don't know. I thought about going and working on Splenda or oil or whatever you do as a chemical engineer, and it didn't feel that appealing anymore. Also, I wasn't sure how accessible plants were going to be, chemical plants. So I just started looking around, and part of going back, so I started working in a lab. There was a lab around there, and it was fun. It was chicken pneumonia. We had it's an agricultural school, University of Connecticut, and we care about diseases that affect livestock, and there's chicken pneumonia. So we had a chicken pneumonia lab. Started working in there. That was pretty cool. But the big thing was when I went back, I said I was athletic, right? A lot of my friends played sports, guitar, rock climbing, all of these activities that I did prior to my injury. And I couldn't do any of those things anymore. So I was back with the people that I loved, and they all had activities they did that I also loved. But I couldn't do the things with the people that they did most of the time. And I felt this huge rift between myself and them because I just couldn't be involved in the stuff that had made us bonded in the first place anymore. And, they hung out with me, and they were good friends and stuff. But I think that was the saddest part of my life, like in terms of feeling depressed. And emotions are weird. Like sometimes you don't know why you're feeling them. And I remember being sad and having to write down in my, like a journal, like, I feel really bad, and I just got to figure out why. And it was either because I couldn't do the things. I narrowed it down to it's either I can't do the stuff that I used to love, or I just miss the bonds that I had with the people doing those things. And I couldn't fix a lot of the stuff where I was like, all right, I can't really do those things anymore in the way that I did them, but I can find things and people that I can actually still do things with. And so I was in those labs at the time, and there were grad students, and they were like, yeah, like we just like play board games all the time. And I was like, oh, I could do that. I could sit at a table.
Yeah.
I like those types of things. And so I started hanging out with them and playing board games and stuff. And that was pretty great. And I was like, man, these guys are great. I want to do this stuff. So I just need to go to a place where there's as much nerdy people doing nerd stuff that is all sitting around a table, and then I'll be great. Everything will be fine. Well, that's grad school. So like, let's go to grad school. So I'm part of my science career was just that I wanted to go where there was lots of nerds who would sit around and play board games, and that seemed like the apex place to go. So I was like, all right, let's get into this. And in the process, I realized that I could, being in a lab, my hands are actually the perfect shape for pipetting. Still, I still can do my thumb and my grip the things. And most of lab is sitting at a bench. I could sit at a bench. I'm in a wheelchair. It's great. I'll sit there all day. And so the lab environment seemed to work out really well for me. I also like thinking and problem solving, and engineering is problem solving. And biology at a lab level is problem solving. So a lot of the things that I wanted to do translated over, and it was very accessible in terms of I felt like I could do it at a comparable level. Like I'm always at a disadvantage, and there are always tons of challenges, but I have a chip on my shoulder about that kind of stuff and like to prove people wrong. So but it was within reason, right? Like there are, and not to say you shouldn't do the things that are without reason. Watching you guys ride across the country, I was like, that seems pretty unreasonable, but it's freaking amazing that they're doing it. And I've actually known a lot of other people in the spinal cord injury in wheelchairs that are like, I do mountain biking where I ride face first down a mountain on like a little cart, and I'm like, that's insane, but okay.
Yeah,
like do it, dude.
Reason is subjective, right? Like it means something different to all different people. So
yeah,
maybe there is no unreasonable. It's just
that's true. That's true.
A different reason. Yeah,
yeah. So yeah, that's my science journey. So, but and another part of that science journey was I thought I would work on spinal cord injury. That I was learning that there was labs about that, and I could eventually work on it. And I didn't end up eventually going in that direction because it was too emotionally devastating. As a scientist, you have to apply skepticism to whatever you're doing, right? Big part of being a scientist is being like, well, that data's bullshit, and I don't believe the thing that you did there, and you better prove to me that you did that, and I got to read your work and make sure that it's done well, right? And we don't believe things unless there's a lot of evidence for it. And so if I had, I started working on neuroscience, I have to read the literature on spinal cord injury and approach it with the skepticism that I would any other science, and it just, I didn't like doing it. I wanted it to work too much, and I didn't want to have to read it and be like, man, this has such a long way to go, and it hurts me every time I have to realize how far we are away from helping this community. So then I went and just started working on other rare diseases because I figure I can view their stuff with an objective lens more easily than I can my own without feeling sad all the time. So, but yeah. Some of it was that. Some of it was just I wanted nerdy people to play board games with. Yeah.
So the question of what is a good and fulfilling life is kind of just like you said, one foot in front of the other. Even though none of us do that very well, what's next is, I don't know. Let's see, right? Like I think that's part of it, is just being curious and seeing what's next. I mean, I don't know that any of us could plan out, all that far in the future, especially with the uncertainty of everything that's happened in our past. But you just kind of see what's next and follow, like you said, like your whole friend group changed, right? From all the athletes to all the nerds. And I love that shift also, because I feel like a lot of times we're very recent, and you probably were. I mean, you were definitely torn up, right? But you followed where you needed to go to this other group, different world, right? And so I think there's a lot of my answer in that too, because I think a lot of doors, seemingly closed when I was diagnosed with FA. I wasn't going to be Michael Jordan or LeBron James, but there were things that I could do, and I just had to be able to use those to fulfill my life. So, Sean, what would you say?
Same. I've never been one to linger too long in the bad news. It's one thing when something doesn't go my way, it's absolutely a bummer, and there's some grief to process, especially if it's at a large scale, right? It's one thing if my coffee doesn't taste the way it should versus, I'm living life in a wheelchair or whatever. Like there's different levels of impact, but I've never been one to focus a lot of energy on the bad news because I recognize in some cases, many cases, I can't do anything to change the past. I can't do anything to fix that thing. But I can control, and what I do have impact over is how I deal with it or how I move forward. And moving forward looks different for everybody, for everything. And even though it's a cliche phrase that doesn't apply to maybe the three of us, putting one step in front of the other is how you get to the top of Mount Everest. It might take some people longer, it might be more challenging, but we can all get there with the right mindset, if you will. So for me, there are a lot of things I wish I could do. I know that's, like you said, Joe, there are just some things I know I can't fix. So I'm going to not spend a lot of energy or time there because my energy and my time are going to be better used and I'll be better served if I focus my time and energy on things that I know I can do or things I know I can impact.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's so hard, giving credit to myself, to all of us. There's so much emotion wrapped up in, like, when you're 12 years old and projecting a vision of what the future might look like, and then all of a sudden, by the way, it never ends up like your 12-year-old self. There's 1,000 different ways that it could change, right? But it's always, everyone's torn up by it not ending up just like that vision, right? And so I think it's really hard. And I love your approach, Sean, the words anyway, because I think the three of us and many people can relate. A lot of times it's about trying to overcome the emotions and really think objectively. I can't change what happened. Like, no matter how I feel about it, that doesn't matter. Like, my feelings are not going to change the situation. So thinking objectively about what you can do.
One thing I'll give some credit to, I think Job's touching on it. You were talking about studying the data of your particular condition, knowing it's hard to be skeptical about, right? So it just causes me to think about the importance to recognize that it's not going to be easy, especially in our cases. Well, with Kyle and I, our condition is progressive. Joe, I assume yours is kind of set in stone, but I also kind of assume it causes a lot of other challenges as your body ages. So it's not like it never changes.
Yeah.
So that means we're constantly up against that battle of grieving and that battle of dealing with what we thought it should be. And that's not easy. It's not like we all did that one, over a couple weeks period of being depressed and up and down. And, in our Zen moment, we decided life is going to be good and here's how we're going to make it good. Unfortunately, we probably have to deal with that, or at least I know I do, deal with that kind of space or setting pretty regularly.
Yeah, like moment to moment, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a log of neuropathic pain and spasticity and various other things that have just been, they get worse as you get older, but I feel like everybody's body gets worse as they get older, but different scales, different whatever. But it's a challenge. It's not a one time you overcome it and then it's gone forever. That's a really good point, right? Like, it's a progressive acceptance that a bunch of things that you didn't think could go wrong are going to continue to pop up and continue to potentially get worse, potentially go wrong. there's this like secular Buddhist concept of not suffering twice, right? Where we are destined to decay and to die eventually. That is the human experience. That is what will happen to all of us. There is no stopping that. That is just a thing that's going to occur. And to suffer twice would be to spend your life in fear of that happening, right? That I am afraid of the pain. I am afraid of the decay. I'm afraid of the death. I'm afraid of these things, and I will let them tarnish or make worse the time that I have before that happens by being so afraid or so resistant to this thing that's definitely going to occur, right? And you don't want that to bleed into the good time that you have, because there's great times to be had for all of us, and we have. So I'm sure I know you have plenty of things to be thankful for. I definitely have plenty of things that I love in my life, and I don't want to spend all of the time that I could have enjoying those things worrying about the next time I'm going to have a spike in pain, or the next time that this unpreventable bad thing is going to occur. And I've always thought that was a really cool concept and a great concept to keep in mind on a daily basis, that when you're going to deal with those things, they're going to suck. And you're just going to deal with them. And then you're going to try to forget about them and go back to not thinking about them as soon as possible, because the longer you let it occupy your brain space, the more you're letting it win.
That's a good point.
Yep.
You give it power when you let it occupy your brain space.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. For sure.
Joe, can you tell us a fulfilling part of your job, your career? Is there an aspect to it that is particularly fulfilling for you?
Yeah. Well, there's quite a few. One is that I just love playing with data. Actually, in my spare time, I do like data science on the video games that I play. I have a blog where I just apply the same stuff I do to protein analysis to characters in a video game. But so part of it is I just love playing with data, and so I get so much data at work, and I get to make cool visualizations and make it parsable for everyone. But part of it is that David brings patients in, and we get to see, it's a community. Like there's only a couple hundred patients in our database. We get to know some of them by name. Some of them come visit the offices. And many of them now have treatments that work pretty well for them, and it makes a huge difference in their lives. These rare disease communities tend to be small. Well, they are small by nature, but they're tight knit, right? Like when I first got paralyzed, I learned most of the stuff about insurance and things like that from just other paralyzed people who offered their time and reached out to me and were like, yeah, no, whatever you need. Like here's everything I know about this thing. And me and my mom at the time were like, wow, thank you so much. But now whenever I see somebody who's, paralyzed, I'm like, hey, like, do you want to know all the stuff that's going to happen? Because I have a bunch of info, a bunch of bad stuff that's going to happen that you can prepare for now, and it won't be so bad. And this Castleman's community, they actually get together each year and come to Philly and have groups where they get to network with each other and learn about the modern, what's going on in the research. But the networking is the part that touches me, because I just know what it felt like to be so confused and scared and overwhelmed by this like huge thing, and have other people that already had it swoop in and be like, it's not so overwhelming. Like here's some lifelines and what you can do. And being a part of the science team on a community like that, I know how much every breakthrough is going to mean for this community. Even if we're not completely curing it, if we just find a better treatment, if we find a way to make quality of life better, whatever I do with my work here is going to have value. So those are the parts of the job that fulfill me, and why I really enjoy what I do.
That's wonderful.
Awesome.
Well, Joe, we really appreciate you sharing with us today. We appreciate your work in the rare disease community. And we appreciate the way that you approach your life and figure out how to build a good and fulfilling life.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for sharing with us and having a conversation today on the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I had a really nice time chatting with you.
Sean, we are so fortunate to have Joe on the team of incredible dedicated scientists in the rare disease community. Not only does he know what the heck he's doing with data, but he's an amazing person who really thinks deeply about what he does and what it means to him and to the people he serves.
And like he said, he's okay with using colors to help me follow along with his work.
Whatever it takes.
You're 100% right. Joe was such a down-to-earth interview, an incredibly warm-hearted individual. Like, I really had a good time chatting with him and getting his perspective on life. And I think it's kind of fun. I'll let listeners know, I think it was the only interview, Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, in 10 years or almost 10 years, where we hung up but remained on the line for another 30 minutes just talking life. And yeah, I was really, really, I enjoyed that. It was enriching. So not only the interview, but the connection and the friendship that we have with Joe now, I really appreciate that.
Sean, I agree. It was an amazing conversation.
Well, Kyle, like you mentioned early on, we save gratitude and our thank you notes for the end of every episode. As listeners know, we find it valuable to root ourselves in gratitude. So at the end of every episode, we make it a point to say thank you and to share a note of gratitude. So, Kyle, who's your thank you note going out to today?
Well, this comes from the time that we were talking about earlier when I had no underwear. And I think I may have mentioned that my battery in my car died. So when it snows around here, I have a couple of really kind neighbors that go out and they clean my car off. And then they'll come grab the keys and go out and move my car so that like the snow removal can come in and clear out my parking space.
Wow.
And so really nice. So I gave them the keys during that time and they went out there and the car wouldn't start. So the battery was so dead that the door locks didn't even work. And so I called a tow truck because I was going to tow it to the dealership to get it worked on. Because partly it's a hybrid. So you open the hood to look in there. You know, usually you like hook up a jumper cable to the battery. You open the hood. I have no idea what's in there. Like so we're looking up on YouTube, all this stuff. Turns out the actual battery is in the back, like in the trunk part of the van. Anyway, so I call a tow truck. He comes out and he's like, all right, let me see if I can get it started first and then we might not need to tow it. So he's working, we're all looking at YouTube videos where he's climbing in the van, like into the back to get the battery because the door won't open, all this stuff. Finally, he hooks this little thing up to it. We start the car and it starts.
Wow.
And so my thank you note goes out to Big Time Towing and the amazing tow truck driver who came out and got my car started in the snow.
Sounds like he did some extra. Like he went above and beyond the norm of just, yeah, we'll tow it and you owe $300 or
right.
Yeah, it's not gonna work. Like that's cool. I appreciate hearing that. Kyle, my thank you note today is a bit anonymous. when this episode comes out, listeners will know that we have begun our return trek home from a wonderful cruise. So I'm a little depressed just saying that out loud, even though we haven't even left for the cruise yet. But anyway, the Rare at Sea cruise has been, a brainchild of ours that we've just worked on to bring to life over the last year and a half. And it's kind of been expensive, the website, little things here and there. Well, thankfully, we had an individual connected with Effie Parks, who is also a host of her own podcast, the Once Upon a Gene, and also helping to organize the cruise. Well, somebody she knows stepped up to pay for something related to the cruise, and that happens to be the T-shirts that we had custom made for everybody. And Kyle, we have like 72 people going. Shirts are pricey. Several $100, about $800 in total. And this individual said, what, I'll cover those. So that was such an incredible lift. I'm very grateful that somebody took on that burden to lighten the load for the rest of us. So I really appreciate that. And I really don't know at this stage if they're okay with, us saying who they are or if they want to remain anonymous. So for the sake of it, I'm just saying they're anonymous. And I really appreciate their kindness and their generosity. So thank you to our Rare at Sea cruise T-shirt donor / sponsor, if you will. We really appreciate you picking that up for us.
Yeah, and I feel like the underpinning of your gratitude is that it was not expected.
Yeah.
And so, it's just really nice to have that support.
For sure. Absolutely.
And thanks to Joe for giving us his time today. Like we said, an amazing connection. Check out our show notes for a link to the Center for Cytokine Storm Treatment in Laboratory at UPenn. If you liked this conversation, please share it with a friend. As always, subscribe on all your podcast apps. Until next time, keep living with urgency. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This show is possible with your support. Visit twodisableddudes.com to stay connected.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast player.